If you agree that real heroes don't need recognition to prove their worth, like and subscribe. Because sometimes, the quietest person in the room carries the loudest story of them all. They said she was just a temp. A polite young woman with tired eyes and steady hands, tucked away in the corner of a government office where the hum of printers and clicking keyboards made up the daily symphony. No one really paid attention to Clara Jensen, 28, data analyst, contract position, polite smile. She was the kind of person who made coffee for others, but never asked for any herself. The kind of woman people forgot was even there until they needed something copied, filed, or fixed. It was just another Tuesday morning in the DC Federal Resource Center. Fluorescent lights, lukewarm coffee, the buzz of chatter about deadlines, until the colonel walked in. But before that moment, there was only the rhythm of routine. Clara sat at her desk typing up logistics reports. Her reflection ghosted faintly in the glass divider beside her. The office was all motion, suits brushing past, interns with clipboards, telephones ringing. But Clara's world was still, measured, focused. She didn't talk much, didn't share where she came from, and nobody asked. Her desk was bare except for a worn notebook, a fountain pen that looked older than she was, and a small silver emblem pinned discreetly on her lapel, a winged torch. The kind you'd mistake for a jewelry brand logo unless you knew what it really was. And no one in that building did. That morning, everything shifted in seconds. The atmosphere changed when the new regional director arrived, Colonel Raymond Ellis, retired Army, known for his precision and no-nonsense approach. You could feel his presence before you saw him. That quiet command that comes from decades of leading men into places most wouldn't dare go. He entered with his staff, exchanging brief nods as he prepared to meet his new civilian team. People straightened their jackets, minimized browser tabs, and waited for the formality to pass. Clara didn't look up. She just kept typing, her posture straight, fingers moving across the keys with soft confidence. But as he spoke, introducing himself, thanking the team for their diligence, his voice trailed off mid-sentence. His eyes had landed on her. Not on her face, not even on her desk, but on that emblem glinting faintly under the ceiling light. At first, no one noticed the silence. Then the pause stretched too long. A few people glanced up from their screens, wondering what had caught his attention. The colonel's expression shifted from focus to disbelief. His shoulders stiffened. His voice softened. "Ma'am, where did you get that emblem?" The words didn't make sense to anyone. Not the interns, not the analysts, not even Clara, who blinked and looked up for the first time, confused by the title. "Ma'am." He was addressing her like a superior officer, not a junior employee. You could have heard a pin drop. The air felt heavier somehow, like everyone had collectively forgotten to breathe. Clara hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was a gift," she said, unsure if that explanation would do. The colonel stepped closer, eyes narrowing, his tone hushed but urgent. "That emblem," he said quietly, "wasn't given. It was awarded once. Kandahar, 2018. You could see the color drain from her face. She didn't know how to respond, and suddenly the room was a sea of wide eyes and half-finished tasks. To most of them, Kandahar was just a name on the news. But to the colonel, it was the place he nearly died, the ambush that cut off his unit from command, the blackout that silenced every line of communication, until one anonymous civilian tech team rerouted satellite channels and got them out alive. The team that, according to records, never made it home. He remembered the symbol on their transmission signature, the torch and wings. He'd seen it once, burned into the data screen of the comms unit as they escaped under fire. He thought everyone behind that signal was gone. And now, standing 10 feet away from him, was a woman wearing it on her blazer like it was nothing. The silence turned into whispers. The colonel's aides exchanged looks. A few employees fidgeted uncomfortably. But he didn't move. His voice softened, almost reverent. "May I ask your name, miss?" he said, even though her ID badge was visible. "Clara Jensen," she answered. He nodded slowly, his eyes glinting with recognition, not from memory, but from the story that haunted him. "Jensen," he murmured, "the signal engineer, my God." He exhaled sharply and took a step back, the weight of years catching up with him. Clara's fingers trembled against the keyboard. For a moment, she looked like she might stand, then stopped herself. Her coworkers stared, waiting for an explanation that wouldn't come. And in that strange, suspended minute, the world outside that office kept turning. Phones rang unanswered, emails piled up, and yet every heartbeat in that room aligned to the same stunned rhythm. A retired colonel, a man known for never breaking decorum, was standing there, eyes fixed on a junior analyst like he was looking at a ghost. His voice cracked just slightly when he finally said, "You saved my convoy." Clara froze, the words landing like a forgotten echo. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She didn't remember every detail of that night, only fragments. The heat, the static, the sound of distant artillery, and the voice on the comms screaming coordinates she couldn't forget. She thought no one knew her name. She'd left that world behind. But in that office, surrounded by spreadsheets and fluorescent lights, the past had found her. No one else understood what was happening. They just knew something sacred had been unearthed. And as the colonel stood there in silence, a kind of reverence filled the space. For the first time in years, Clara felt seen. Not as the quiet analyst or the temp no one noticed, but as the woman who once held a line open long enough to keep 40 soldiers breathing. The colonel straightened his back, took a breath, and gave her a slight nod. Not the kind given to a subordinate, but to an equal. Then, in a voice thick with emotion, he said the words that froze every heartbeat in the room. "Welcome back, Specialist Jensen." No one moved. The hum of the office seemed to fade. Clara looked down at the emblem, her fingers brushing against the cool metal, and the sound of the colonel's voice carried through the silence like a thread connecting two lifetimes. Outside, the morning light hit the glass, catching the winged torch on her lapel. The ordinary day was over. Nothing, not for her, not for anyone in that office, would ever be quite the same again. The colonel's words hung in the air long after he spoke them, rippling through the room like a current no one could name. Specialist Jensen. For a few seconds, the office was frozen between disbelief and awe. Clara sat motionless, her expression a mixture of confusion and dread. The colonel's tone hadn't carried rank or reprimand. It carried recognition, the kind that comes from memory burned deep into the soul. Before anyone could say another word, he gestured quietly for her to join him. She hesitated, then followed him to a glass-walled conference room, her steps echoing like distant footsteps through a hallway of ghosts. As the door closed behind them, the office came alive with whispers, some confused, others reverent. "Specialist?" someone murmured. Was she military? The questions had no answers, and no one dared interrupt whatever was unfolding behind that closed door. Inside, the colonel stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the skyline, as if searching for a place that no longer existed. "You were with Delta Operations Unit 4, weren't you?" he said quietly, without turning around. Clara's voice trembled. "I was with the support team, the relay station." He nodded once, his reflection faintly visible in the glass. "You rerouted the uplink during the Kandahar blackout. We would have been gone without that signal." His words came slowly, like he'd carried them for years. Clara lowered her gaze. "I only did what I was trained to do, sir." The colonel turned then, eyes sharp but filled with a kind of gentleness that comes from recognition. "You did what no one else could." She hesitated before answering. "I don't remember all of it," she admitted softly. "The concussion. I was told our base took a hit. Most of the team didn't make it." Her voice cracked. "When I woke up in Germany, they said the program was classified, the operation buried. I just wanted to forget." The colonel's eyes softened with something between pain and gratitude. "You were listed as unaccounted for," he said. "I read every report myself. For years I thought you were gone." Clara looked up, and for the first time, their eyes met. Not as superior and subordinate, but as two survivors of the same storm. The colonel moved closer, his voice low but steady. "That emblem on your lapel. You know it's not supposed to exist outside a vault." Clara nodded faintly. "They gave it to me when I left. Said it was a personal acknowledgement, not official." She smiled weakly. "It was the only thing I kept." The colonel exhaled, a deep, heavy sound that carried both relief and sorrow. "You earned that more than most people earn their medals." Through the glass, the rest of the office could see them talking but couldn't hear the words. Some pretended to work, others simply watched. It wasn't every day you saw a decorated colonel standing with his head bowed in front of a civilian analyst. Clara's co-workers had known her as quiet, competent, perhaps a little distant. None of them had imagined she once carried a radio pack heavier than her body weight or transmitted under mortar fire. When they finally stepped out, the colonel's expression had changed. He looked at her not as an employee, but as someone whose name deserved to be spoken with respect. "You save lives," he said simply. "Including mine." The words reached beyond her. They carried through the room like an unspoken order, silencing every murmur. Clara blinked back tears, standing there beneath the sterile office lights, wishing the ground would swallow her. She had spent years trying to disappear. But on that day, she realized the past doesn't always return to haunt. It sometimes comes back to honor. The colonel gave her a single, firm nod before walking away, his polished shoes echoing down the hall. No one dared speak until he was gone. Clara returned to her desk, her hands trembling over the keyboard, her screen blinking with unfinished data. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel invisible. The emblem on her lapel glinted softly under the light, and for just a moment, she allowed herself to remember, not the fear, not the loss, but the purpose. That afternoon, the office felt different. The chatter was softer, the air heavier with something no one could quite describe. By 4 o'clock, a quiet message went out. Everyone to the main floor for a brief announcement. No one knew what it was for. Some assumed it was another audit. Others guessed a protocol change. But when they gathered, they found the colonel standing at the front of the room, hands clasped behind his back, and beside him, Clara Jensen, still trying to disappear into her own shadow. The colonel's voice carried steady and low, but there was something new in it now, something human. "Most of you didn't know," he began, "that among you works a person whose courage once crossed continents." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Clara's cheeks flushed. She wanted to protest, to step away, but he shook his head lightly as if to say, "Let me do this." "Years ago," he continued, "my unit was trapped outside Kandahar during a full blackout. We'd lost all comms, surrounded and blind. The signal that reached us, the one that got us out alive, came from a civilian tech specialist who stayed behind to keep the system running under fire. That specialist's name was never recorded publicly because the mission was classified. But I remember it. Jensen. Clara Jensen." Silence filled the space. No clapping, no applause, just the kind of silence that feels like respect. The colonel stepped aside, giving her room to speak, but Clara only managed a whisper. "I was just doing my job." The colonel smiled faintly. "So did every soldier who ever stood their ground," he replied. "But most of us didn't do it unarmed." He reached into his jacket pocket and placed something small on her desk. A service patch, frayed at the edges, the kind used on field uniforms years ago. "You earned this," he said softly, "and I carried it with me since that night." Her hand trembled as she touched it, realizing it was from the very unit she'd saved, the patch that once belonged to the colonel himself. "Sir, I don't," she began, but he cut her off with a slight shake of his head. "It's not a gift," he said. "It's a return." For a long moment, no one spoke. The glow from the setting sun filtered through the blinds, painting the office gold. It made the emblem on her lapel shine brighter than ever. Around her, people stood straighter, no longer looking at her like the quiet analyst, but like someone whose presence had weight, whose silence carried history. And maybe for the first time since she came home, Clara Jensen didn't feel like a ghost. She didn't feel like someone who'd left pieces of herself buried overseas. She just felt seen. When the meeting ended, people drifted away slowly, talking in hushed tones. The colonel lingered by the doorway, watching her pack her things. "You know," he said quietly, "we never got to debrief properly." She smiled, tired but warm. "I think we just did." He nodded, gave a small salute, not for show, but from habit, from honor, and walked out into the corridor, leaving her standing in the amber light. Clara looked down at the patch in her palm, then at the emblem still pinned to her lapel. She traced the edges with her thumb and whispered something only she could hear, for all of them. As the office lights dimmed and the computers powered down one by one, she stepped outside into the cooling air, the city lights flickering awake around her. The wind tugged gently at her hair, carrying the faint scent of rain. She tilted her head toward the horizon, where day met dusk, and for a fleeting moment, she could almost hear the static of the old field radio, the one that once carried her voice across the desert and saved 40 lives. That sound had haunted her for years. But now, it just felt like peace.